Our next person is Arjun Ravi, is a music journalist, co-founder of N87.in. He's written for several leading national and international publications. I'm told he believes in brutal honesty, and he's here to tell us his opinion view about the growing Indian blogosphere. So, Arjun Ravi.
My name is Arjun S Ravi. I'm the co-founder of something called N87 and a director at a company called OML, only much louder. I started blogging in the early 2000s, and I was mainly writing like personal blogs back then, like about gymming and just album reviews and stuff. And then in 2008, in April 2008, I started a blog called indecision.com, and then my life sort of changed. So I'm just sort of going to tell you how this sort of happened and how it became N87, and I'm sure some of you are aware of the kind of stuff that we do within the music and the sort of alternative entertainment space over here. Music blogs in the mid sort of 2000s started off as an alternate space for people to find out about new artists. Most mainstream publications will push you the same sort of big label stuff, whether that's a Lady Gaga, U2 or whatever. But if you wanted to find something outside of that, outside of the mainstream, there were not too many places where you could do that, and sort of music blogs like Pitchfork, Stereogum, Tiny Mixtapes, The Hype Machine aggregated a lot of this information, and which is why sort of bands like Vampire Weekend, Arcade Fire, I'm so sure if some of you guys have heard of those bands, are really popular right now because of the sort of music blogs that really promoted them. And some of these blogs have a huge following, like Pitchfork. Back in its sort of heyday, if it gave like a band a really terrible review, like if you got like 2 on 10 or as a rating on Pitchfork, you knew your album's not going to sell that well, your shows are going to have a really poor turnout. And yeah, so essentially these were really big in the mid sort of 2000s. Simultaneously, the sort of music scene in India was also sort of blowing up, especially the alternative music scene. I'm not talking about the mainstream, which is Bollywood and your film music, but everything outside of that, which technically should also include classical music, devotional music, and all that kind of stuff. But my affinity was more towards rock, metal, electronica, more urban genres of music. At least some of these names must be familiar to you, whether that's Indian Ocean, the Raghu Dixit Project, Pentagram, Duelist Inquiry. All of these guys have really sort of broken out in the last sort of 5 or 10 years. And unfortunately, music journalism in India wasn't really keeping up. Most of the music press in India, especially in mainstream publications, isn't written by like music writers, like people who have an affinity towards listening or discovering new music. When you join a new magazine or like a feature supplement of a newspaper, your Bombay Times, Mumbai Newsline, whatever it is you read, more often than not, you're sort of given a beat, irrespective of whether that's your preference or not. So you're a new writer, you write about film, or you write about, travel, or you write about music, even if that may not be your sort of first preference or first choice. So there's not that many like sort of hardcore music journalists in the country who are talking about this kind of music. As a result, the coverage of music is fairly patronizing. I used to run a feature on the site called Press Charges, and essentially what I used to do was I used to take like press clippings of like mainstream publications talking about music in India, at least the alternative music scene, and how they used to get it wrong. So that first article is actually a preview that the Mumbai Mirror did for a band called Shkabang. And the best part about it, apart from a lot of factual errors and everything, was that the preview actually came out after the gig had gotten over. So, it doesn't, like Imogen Heap came to India a couple of years ago to perform at our festival and do a lot of other stuff. And they called her the front woman of Massive Attack. Massive Attack is a band that has 2 male frontmen. There's not even a female there. So anyway, there's a reluctance to look sort of beyond established talent and really sort of research and find out what was going on. And having been a writer for a significant period of time, especially writing about music, I sort of took it upon myself to change that. Essentially, I was targeting this guy. he's the kind of guy who's sort of, discovering, consuming predominantly all of his content on Facebook and Twitter. He's reading articles like, you won't believe what this man saw when he was doing nothing. What are they up to? Like, what music are they releasing and that kind of stuff. So I had this sort of opportunity and I really wanted to do it. I've always wanted to start my own sort of magazine and the sort of blogging platform. I started this on WordPress, indecision.com, bought the domain April 2008, going to a lot of gigs and, pretty much trashing bands left, right, and center and, being a little honest about what was going on. Of course, we always sort of did it with a sort of love for music that only comes if you're like a really I'm the kind of guy who, if I discover a new band, I need to tell everybody right now, listen to this song because it's going to change your life, like, a hardcore sort of music fan in that sense. So, I sort of started it because so much was happening in the mainstream of music coverage, which I did not agree with. I wanted to change that. And I started indecision.com. And to sort of get it to where it was, of course, like I mentioned, I had an undying love for music, still do. You need to have a little bit of writing chops. Over the years, as Ashwin mentioned in my intro, I have written for a significant number of publications, which is always helpful. A little bit of basic knowledge of HTML and like some CSS. CMS is like WordPress. Would totally help. I remember Digit magazine or Chip magazine back in the day used to have these like sort of tutorials that they used to give as supplements. And I used to voraciously read those, just so I could figure out how do you make something on a website go from left to right and like, do different animations and stuff like that. And also like a keen online self-awareness. I know that music blogs are really popular around the world, keep up to date with what's going on in the meme sphere of sort of digital technology. So it's always good to have that level of sort of self-awareness. I also sort of started pushing this as a promoter. Like everything was DIY. I sort of knew very early on that this was what I wanted to do. I didn't want a job. I want a regular job where I have to go to an office. I didn't want to write for anybody else anymore. Well, I still do write for people, but I didn't want that to be my living, and I wanted to do something on my own, start my own sort of magazine. So I really tried to do everything that I knew I could do to push this as a concept, whether that's through editorial and like being really committed to it. So regardless of, I would go and watch a gig at the Blue Frog or any of the other venues in the city that night, and the next morning you'd have like an 800-word review of that band. Just like dogged sort of commitment. The last sort of few years, I've written literally thousands of posts on my site, and now, and at that time when I was starting up, I figured out that the way I wanted to reach out to readers or fans or whoever was by being where they were on ground. So I tied up with a lot of events that were happening within the music sphere as a media partner, just so I could have my sort of logo over there and look cool and everything. But at least a few people saw it, and it became slightly more popular. Also, like sort of became like a social media slut. Used Facebook and Twitter like wholeheartedly to promote everything that I was doing. And then this sort of is what happened, really, between April 2008 and now. At the start, when at April 2008, when I booked the domain, I didn't really know what was sort of coming, but I just knew that I wanted to do this a lot. By 2010, I met a guy called Vijay Nair, and he was the CEO of a company called OML. And at that time, I sort of knew about OML because I was part of the scene, so to speak. Everybody knows everybody within the music scene. And he had this idea of starting a music platform where not only you could go and sort of read about music and stuff like that, but you could also listen to it. So, you could listen to it or buy it or like, come to events and stuff like that. And that's when we sort of germinated the idea of NH7 as a brand. And in March 2010 was when we started sort of formalizing what that concept would be. And at a very cult music conference in September 2010, we launched NH7.in. And the same year, we had the first edition of our music festival, the N87 Weekender. And just last year, we completed like 4 years of it. We've taken it to 4 cities now. OML is also involved in a lot of non-live sort of music-based stuff. We have a bunch of TV shows that we do and stuff like that. It all comes from the fact that we're really big music fans, and I personally am. And like I said, if I find out a band, I really want all of you guys to know, check these guys out. Like, these music will change your life, or rock and roll or whatever. I just thought I'd put that in, a small plug for the festival. N87 Weekender, we've sort of, like I said, it comes from this heart of us all being music fans, and it started with the small idea that we wanted to do what nobody else was doing within the country. So yeah, it's come quite far. Some people have nice things to say about it. If you've been there, chances are you'll be back next year. Anyway, yeah, shameless plug. And that's really about it. I'll take questions when we're up for the next session.